Hello, guys. In today's second installment of Up to Spec with Seth, we're going to be covering windscreens, pop filters, and distance. I kind of alluded to distance in the first installment, talking about how the general rule of thumb is that if you are closer to the microphone, the less gain you need and the less louder you need to be. The further away you are from the microphone, the louder you need to be, or you may need to bump the gain up. Now, we want to avoid having to overwork our voice and avoiding having to turn up the gain too high. So, generally, coming closer to the microphone is better. But how close do I have to be to the microphone? Well, we have to cover a very interesting topic, which is called the proximity effect. In a very complex explanation, the closer you get to the microphone, the more excited the bass frequencies become and are more attenuated than the mid and the high frequencies, making the voice sound more bassy. But in layman's terms, it just means that the closer that you get to the microphone, the more bassy your voice is going to sound. And I'm not trying to purposefully change how my voice sounds right now, but if I move away, you'll notice that there's a thinning of my voice. And also to kind of show you that distance thing, I want to make sure I'm aiming for -18 on Audacity's meter. So this is my comfortable talking voice at this distance. And then this is my compensating voice at this distance, around 2 fists away from the microphone. And then as I move even further away, I actually have to be a lot more louder to compensate for almost 3 fists away from the microphone. It gets very drastic. And what does that really mean? Well, if it isn't going to be the gain that's compensating for your voice, you're going to be compensating for the distance. So, coming as close to the microphone as you possibly can is going to be important, so that way you don't need to turn up the gain. And just like I've said, you are louder the closer you are. But your voice gets a lot more bassier the closer you get. And why is this important to know? Well, for the example, I'll be throwing in the thin windscreen for now, but as I come closer to the microphone, you'll notice that it gets very intimate. It gets very bassy. And I'm not trying to lower my voice right now on purpose. I'm just saying that it gets very smooth the closer that you get to the microphone. So if you want to get a little more intimate with the audience, you don't even need to have your lips touching the microphone. You can actually be a little bit off like this and you'll still get the proximity effect happen. Again, coming closer just makes your voice a lot more bassy, but it requires a lot of very good vocal control so that way you don't yell as you're closer to the microphone. And then here's my voice as I'm at my comfortable position, at my comfortable speaking level. And then as I come a little closer, it gets a little more bassy, it gets a little bit more lower. It just sounds very smooth. This is the power of the Shure SM7B. The acoustics of this microphone actually allow for this to happen. And without getting a little too crazy in depth, for now just know the closer you get to a microphone, the more bassy it's going to sound. It happens for every microphone. Right here is a Behringer Xm 8500. It's a microphone you can buy off Amazon for around $35 to $50. Get lucky on Kijiji, you can get these used for almost $20. And this is no different. But there is actually something that we need to note about the Shure SM7B. Again, the same microphone we have at CJSW that some microphones don't have. And that is there is actually no wind protection. This cage may look like it can protect itself from the wind, but in reality it doesn't. If I were to take off the grill from this microphone, this handheld microphone, you'll notice that there's 2 layers of wind protection that the SM7B does not have. Well, actually, if I think about it, there's 3. The first one is very, I guess you can say it's noticeable. It's this metal frame, this cage. And not a lot of people know this, but right underneath the cage is a foam. This foam is going to add that little extra layer of wind protection. And then on the top of the microphone, we call it the element or the capsule. We'll go more in depth on microphones in another future episode. But for now, just know that there's an extra layer of foam on top of the element that also acts as a means to protect the microphone from very aggressive changes in breathing or in wind. So, cool. I mean, that makes sense. Using foam to muffle the wind noise. Metal can also deflect wind, and that's kind of cool stuff. Okay, maybe I already knew this, but what does this play a role in the way that a microphone sounds? Well, because you've asked, basically, the closer that you get to the microphone, the more susceptible a microphone can be to the proximity effect, but also to plosives and wind. So as I come closer to this microphone, I'm really controlling my airflow, and I'm trying to protect the microphone from those plosives that you hear on B or on P. But if I throw that all out of the window, my years of microphone technique, you'll be able to see that there's a lot of kind of breaths and stuff that get caught, even between the words. And I'm not even exaggerating. This is just how I typically talk, especially if I'm trying to use words like plosive and big or gigantic. These are really big words, big plosives that are really making it hard for you to listen to me. So, okay. Mixed feelings. How close should I be to the microphone? Well, again, you don't want to be too close where you have to employ very strong microphone technique, so that way you don't need to worry about plosives or breaths being caught. So, we do have little cheats, windscreens, and pop filters. To define what a windscreen is very difficult, but we'll put it simply as this. Windscreens are what go around the microphone, directly contacting the microphone body. And they're made out of foam and are typically made for that specific microphone. Don't get me wrong. You can get generic windscreens, but typically these windscreens, like I have here, are made specifically for your microphone. This is the thin windscreen for the Shure SM7B, and then this is the thick windscreen for the Shure SM7B. But what does any of this have to do with distance from the microphone? Well, it does play a role in plosive protection, wind protection, and also engaging the proximity effect. With the thin windscreen, we get very good plosive protection, and we also get pretty good wind protection. At the same time, we only added such a thin layer of foam that allows us to still engage the noticeable low bassy proximity effect of the microphone. Very noticeable. Here's the wind protection, of course. This is without the windscreen. At around the same distance, you'll notice that you're getting the tones of the wind and not this weird, bursty, distorted sound. And again, like I've said, we didn't really add a lot of material, so the proximity effect is pretty dang strong. But as soon as we get this thick foam on, if we try to come close to the microphone, you'll notice that we don't really get that much of a noticeable proximity effect. I'm right on the microphone right now with the thick windscreen, and as soon as I move away, it's not really as noticeable that I've come close. I mean, it kind of is there, but it's not really as bassy as the thin foam. So what does this mean for us who talk on the radio? Well, if you want a more authoritative voice, and you don't want to change the tones of your voice, you may want to just come closer to the microphone. I declare that this is my land, not yours. I totally found this mushroom biome before you did. I don't know what you mean. Compared to being a little further away. Man, I found this mushroom biome it kind of sounds very thin and not as strong, and Again, the word authoritative. The proximity effect can really help you, especially if you don't have any kind of tonalities or accents that you have practiced or have access to. So if you want to have a more authoritative, powerful voice, coming closer is effective. But of course, depending on how thick the windscreen is, it may or may not enable you to use this proximity effect. But just know this thick windscreen offers so much protection from plosives. 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 And also from the wind. 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 The other downside is that if I talk normally, you're actually going to notice that I'm averaging between -24 and -18. And as soon as I remove the windscreen and I'm at the same distance, I'm actually going to be a lot more louder. I'll be around -18 now rather than around -24 at this distance and at this volume. And that's actually because with the thicker material, it does entail that you're distancing yourself more from the microphone. So with a thinner microphone windscreen, you're able to engage the proximity effect, and you're also able to have the benefits of a windscreen, such as wind protection and plosive protection, but not to the scale of the big, thicker foam windscreens out there. But the downside of the plosive protection not being as strong and the wind protection not being as strong gets kind of like overruled by the fact that you still have that chance and the ability to come close and get that authoritative voice that you really, really may like or may not like. At least you have the option. But then for the thick foams, you're actually going to be forcing yourself to talk a little louder, or you have to turn the fader up a little bit more, the gain up a little bit more. So that might be an issue. And then on top of that, with all that extra padding, it also sounds a little bit more muffled. So those are windscreens. We're now going to be talking about pop filters. Pop filters come in different sizes and different shapes, and typically offer the same kind of protection as windscreens. But how would we define a pop filter? Well, I would define it as something that's typically made not for a specific microphone. It will be external. It won't be touching the microphone, typically. And they will be made out of a mesh, a kind of mesh material like nylon or fabric, or thin metal. And they function the same way as a windscreen. They're supposed to offer plosive protection, and they're also gonna offer wind protection. So how about I show you? For time constraints, I won't be putting this on. I'll just be holding it. But here's the wind without the wind protection from a pop filter. That's pretty good. And also on top of that, look how close I can get to the microphone and still engage that beautiful proximity effect. That's just wonderful. That's wonderful, and indeed, and oh my goodness, that's the beauty of a pop filter. Of course, they do have their downsides. They're pretty big and wonky, and the cheaper you go, like I did, this is a generic pop filter. That's like $20. These are very hard to manipulate and they don't typically stay in their shape. But, well, besides that, cheaper materials and not really easy to, not really malleable. It offers the best protection and also allows you to get as close as you want to the microphone if you really want to. Like basically put it right on it. And it offers the wind protection you need and the plosive protection you need. It's beautiful, but what are the downsides to this? Well, besides the obvious, not being able to see the microphone, that's not really important, but the more important is actually for live use. You will typically not see a pop filter used for live streaming, for YouTube videos, and for other live applications like TV broadcasting because it covers the talent, it covers the person speaking. There is, of course, other options, smaller options, like this one, this full metal pop filter. The only issue with this is that it is very expensive. But it does offer the same kind of wind protection and also plosive protection. Wind protection. Wind protection is pretty high. The benefits of the metal windscreens is that they are very deflective compared to, well, the nylon or the fabric versions. But they both function the same way, and it's really up to you if you want to spend the extra money. Would I say it's worth it? I'd say it's worth it, but that's for my personal use and for my personal application. But for you, you may benefit from possibly purchasing a very cheap not windscreen, pop filter off of Amazon or from a local music store such as Long & McQuaid. And you can bring this in, put it on the boom mic arm, and just talk away and not really have to worry. Again, we're not really being videotaped when we're talking on the radio. So unless it's a live streamed event, you can get away with using these pop filters that are very big. And the downside, though, of these options, all of them, is that they all cost money. These windscreens are not cheap, and they typically deteriorate over time because it's absorbing moisture, and they're very hard to clean. You typically don't want to sanitize these with alcohol. It's a no-no. So one windscreen for one person. That's the way to keep it sanitary. For these pop filters, it's no different, but what's kind of cool about these non-metallic pop filters is that you can actually take these apart, unscrew them, and you can actually wash the nylon or the fabric. So you can get away with it. And also you can make your own using leggings. But there's also another alternative to making a pop filter or windscreen to help protect your microphone from plosives and wind, and that's actually using a sock. Now, my sock isn't really that thick, so it won't be as noticeable for the plosives, but it will be noticeable for the wind. And I was doing some experimentation before, but just like we kind of notice with the thick foam, it muffles the sound. Sadly, the thicker the sock will be, the more muffled the sound will be as well. So keeping it very simple, we're just going to throw a sock on here, and we're going to give a listen to the wind. And now the plosive protection. Do you really like plosives? I don't really like plosives as much as you do. Plosives. Big, bad plosives. That's pretty good. And that's for a sock. Make sure it's clean before you throw it on your mic, though. But yeah, for a free alternative to getting a windscreen that's made for your mic or a generic pop filter that's really big and you may actually not even like using it. A sock can also offer beautiful wind protection. And I don't know what it is, but it's very bedroom-esque. And it's like, yeah, pop filter. Ever heard of a pop filter? I use a pop sock. It's pretty good. So, that's awesome. I think I covered what I needed to cover. The distance and the multiple ways, whether or not you pay for it or you can get it free, to help lower plosives, help lower wind noise from your voice or from also external sources, and the distance away from the microphone, what that plays in the way that you sound and how much strain you have on your voice. I know the video was a little longer, but hopefully you guys had a fun time, a learning experience of your own, and I hope that this will help you with the future recordings that you do for advertisements or other things you voice, and also when you're live at CGSW.